Terry here with you today, and today we're going to be talking about sobriety mind hacks. What is a sobriety mind hack? How do you use it? Is it something that you can use to get sober without AA or rehab or anything like that? Well, we're going to talk about that in today's sobriety mind hack. I'll kind of preface and then we'll discuss it. What we're talking about today is operant conditioning. Operant conditioning is where you have a positive or negative type reinforcement. So, if you have a kid, if you've ever had kids or a dog, what happens is you give them positive reinforcement. So, if your dog comes to you and says "I love you," which I think there's like 2 dogs in the world that does that. Mine just makes weird noises and thinks she's talking. But if you give her a treat after that, he or she is going to be more acclimated or more inclined to repeat the behavior, right? So the idea here was brought up by B.F. Skinner way back in the old days of psychology, and he did tests with different animals like mice and things like that, put them in a box, and when they pushed certain buttons, they got different reinforcements, right? So they'd get like a positive reinforcement. So, they'd push a button and they'd get a treat, and they'd continue pushing the button because, as we know, we all like treats, and we like lots of treats, right? And so what would happen is it would reinforce whatever behavior was, and it would connect emotions to it. So they would connect an emotion to pushing the button or whatever it is. Now there's also the negative reinforcement, where if you ever grew up and had parents that told you what was right and what was wrong, you know that sometimes, hey, if you cheated on a test, maybe you got spanked or you got scolded or you got grounded. And what would happen is the idea was to give you the negative reinforcement so that you would no longer do the behavior. And a lot of this psychology stuff is about changing behavior, right? We're looking to change behavior, starting with the thoughts in the mind. But what we don't realize, and what Skinner realized back then, was that a lot of this stuff is not mentally focused, right? We don't think about it. And as alcoholics, what happens is we are giving ourselves positive reinforcement every single time we drink and feel good. When we feel bad, we give ourselves the positive reinforcement and say, hey, I'm going to feel better now. Now, the negative consequences don't seem to outweigh them for the alcoholic. So when I was drinking, I would be like, okay, I wake up hungover and I feel like shit. I lose time at work. I'm losing it with my family. I might be getting legal trouble, DUIs, all kinds of things. And that negative reinforcement isn't anywhere close to the positive reinforcement. Why? Because we only get a DUI once every, bazillion drinks or whatever, unless you're just have somewhere to go. I don't know. But you should never drink and drive, right? And so we look at this and we're like, okay, we only have a little bit of positive or negative reinforcement, but we have this mountain of positive reinforcement saying that drinking is the key, it is the solution. And every time we think about drinking, our thoughts and our emotions are now attached with positive things. And so we look at this and we say, well, what is the key to getting sober? Is it maybe to find positive reinforcements in a different area, maybe not alcohol? Or is it to punish ourselves? And sometimes we go through, as lots of recovery literature talks about, is giving the negative, right? Let's pound the negative. Let's give that guy a spanking or whatever it was, that you had when you were a kid. Don't give anyone spankings. That's not a good idea, right? So yeah, I'll just stop there. But that's kind of the idea, right? Negative reinforcement. And even when I was drinking, I would do things like that. Like I'd pinch myself or I'd try to dwell on the negative feeling and try to get rid of it. But nothing seemed to work, no matter how many positive or negative reinforcements that I used. I had to get sober first and then start building that stuff. So that's the basic idea. I hope I explained it right. It's based on positive and negative reinforcement, positive and negative conditioning. And if you condition people long enough, you're going to get a certain result. And what happened with the alcoholic is we've conditioned ourselves that alcohol is a solution for everything, and it makes us feel better. So, Terry, what are your thoughts on this psychobabble stuff, psychology stuff, which it is good. It's not psychobabble. But.
Well, it kind of makes sense. Well, first of all, good morning to RVA, THC Gamer, Angio, ICU, Al, Alone in Another World. Good to see you all here. Congrats, THC, on 51 days. And yeah, right on. The craziest thing about alcoholism for me is this built-in forgetter that alcoholism gives. Mm-hmm. And, I tend to not dwell on the negative things that happened in my drinking and while I was drinking. And I would just forget these things and I'd remember the good feeling that alcohol gave me. And that was the crazy thing that made me continue to drink is just I just wasn't paying attention to those negative consequences that happen, the legal issues, the marriage issues, all that stuff.
Hmm.
And also I had this feeling of remembering back in the past when drinking worked for me and it would make me feel better. And even though it wasn't doing that now, I still chase that feeling. That's what alcoholism does. It's you just or I just continued to chase the feeling, that good feeling.
Hmm.
That's was the key for me was really one of the keys was really remembering that the negative consequences are just getting worse and worse and they're going to get worse and worse, and that was one of the reasons I ended up having to quit or
Hmm.
quitting. And that was a big key for me, definitely.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of us, when we look for like sobriety mind hacks and stuff like that, we're looking for a quick fix. And for me, I wanted a quick fix. I didn't want to go to rehab. I didn't want to spend the time to learn about my addiction. I just wanted something like, okay, what's this like self help book that I could read 14 pages of and get solved?
Right.
And I was looking and looking for stuff like that. And I didn't realize that while these things hold a lot of merit, what happens is when you're trying to do it, like Anno says, the last 5 years, he didn't make it for more than 4 weeks sober. And what happens is when you're in that cycle, you never give your brain a chance to get recuperated. You never give your brain the chance to get reconditioned. And when you give your brain a chance to get reconditioned, what you're going to notice is that you're going to start to train yourself. This is also known as, what's it known as? There's a fancy term. For those people that went to school, you'll know the fancy term. Exposure therapy, right? And the idea is that if you have something that makes you anxious, scared, worried, or uncomfortable, the idea is to expose yourself to it, knowing you're going to be safe, right? Like, obviously, if you're afraid of dogs, you don't want to go in the lion's den, right? That's not the way to do it. But maybe go and see a friendly dog and pet the friendly dog and train yourself that, hey, there's some friendly dogs, even though I was afraid of this one, I'm going to be okay. And so what happens is when you expose yourself to the stimuli, it starts to reduce the anxiety level every time you do it. And then pretty soon you're like, hey, I'm not really that anxious or uncomfortable anymore. Now, the same thing happens with alcoholism, although what happens is if you're continuing to drink, you're not allowing yourself to build those new pathways because you always have a crutch, right? It's like a guy who has a broken leg and he needs a crutch for 6 months or 3 months or whatever it is. And this guy gets so used to walking on the crutch that his leg becomes weak and he's like, well, maybe I need the crutch for the rest of my life because I broke my leg that one time. Now, that's not always the case. You don't always need the crutch and you don't always need the alcohol. And what happens is when you get sober for 40, 60, 90, 120 days or a year, your brain starts to change and you start to realize, wow, I went through that difficult situation without drinking. I was able to argue with my family without drinking. I was able to go to Christmas, Thanksgiving, New Year's without drinking. And all of a sudden, you train yourself that these things can happen, but it's not going to happen unless you take alcohol off the table. And what I like to do is I like to say, well, maybe you have an alcohol problem, maybe you don't. That's up to you to decide. You can watch other videos. You could diagnose yourself. That's kind of how this thing works. And again, we're not doctors. We don't diagnose anyone. If you are trying to get sober, go to a doctor and say, hey, I've been drinking a lot. What should I do? But we have to look at this and say, well, once we get sober for a while, we need to build these new pathways and we need to look at it and say, well, I'm going to stay sober for a year and I'm going to see what happens, right? Because a lot of people have a hard time saying, I'm going to commit to being sober the rest of my life. And maybe that's a tall order. And, for me, I'm 40 years old. I don't know what's going to happen the rest of my life. Is alcohol off the table? Yeah. I don't want to drink anymore. I know what bad it does. Now, was alcohol off the table in the beginning for my entire life? No, I was scared to death of that. I was like, hey, what the hell, man? You take away my only coping mechanism,
Right.
right? Like the rat that's in the cage that pushes the button to get food. You say, hey, you can't have your button anymore. And he goes, what the hell do you mean I can't have my button? That's how I live. That's my livelihood. If I don't have that button, I'm not going to get food. And that's the same way the alcoholic feels, only he doesn't know the button isn't what provides the food. He's just been trained that it is. The crutch isn't what helps the guy who's already healed walk. He's just been trained that it does. Now, obviously, we need these things to cope, and maybe you went through a period in your life where you use this stuff to cope, but now it's time to say, I need to learn new ways. And as you learn new ways, you're going to condition yourself to say, hey, I don't need that anymore. I'm going to be okay without it. And I think that's the important thing to look at is you're going to be okay without it. You don't need it. You might think you do, but you really don't.
And that's one of the hard parts about this is the fact that you drink the alcohol and it's this instant feeling of gratification, and even if it's short-lived, but it's instant.
Mm-hmm.
And then with that positive reinforcement, it takes time. I mean, I was really lucky when I got sober, and I was just super happy to be sober right away. But I still had, my body was sick. I still had all these outside problems that I had to deal with. And in the back of my mind was saying, a drink, you're going to feel better right away. But, I didn't have that many positive things that were going on in my life at that time. So there's a lot of patience involved and just working the proper direction in sobriety. And that was huge for me to realize that things are going to get better. It just takes time. And that was
Absolutely.
big. Hello, Melanie. Hello back. Good to see you here. And same with Mrs. B. And who was the other one that just came on here? And Gabriella. Good to see you guys. All right.
And upside down mostly also good to see you here too. And
Right.
Anno says, if I give in to my craving, my brain and nervous system reinforces that addictive behavior. I need to starve the craving and not give in because it gets worse every time I give in. And also, I want you to realize that a lot of the effects that alcohol gives you can be realized without alcohol. We just haven't learned them yet. I look
Right.
at it and I used to think, okay, I can't relax without alcohol. How many of you guys feel that way? You're like, hey, after a hard day of work and my mind's spinning from all the shit I got to deal with, I need alcohol and it makes me feel better and it makes me relax. And I used to never be able to just sit there and relax without a drink or without something. And one time, I talk about this a lot, but one time I was at lunch and I was shaky and I hadn't had my drink for the day and I was all screwed up. And the lady rounded the corner with my drink when I went to go to lunch, and I knew that drink was for me. And all of a sudden, my body produced the same feelings, and I started to relax. And I realized that I hadn't had a sip yet. So my body was actually producing all of these things without the alcohol. Only you've been trained over and over. Hey, alcohol is what makes this happen. And I think in our society and in our minds, we give alcohol way more credit than it ever needs. Right? Alcohol doesn't help us really. I mean, maybe it did for a time, but now it's not working any longer. And we have to look at that and say, I'm going to slowly but surely start to train my brain that I don't need it. Start to train my brain and figure out I can relax without it. I can be okay without it. I could be the life of the party without it. Or I can be funny without it. Or I could be attractive without it. Right? Alcohol has a way of making us think that we need it for everything. And what you're going to find when you get sober is all it's really doing, the only thing it really does is it shuts off the narrator. That's what it does. There's a narrator in our head. And you go to somewhere and you're like, oh man, that guy makes more money than me and he's better looking and he's 18 feet tall and I'm only 4 feet tall or whatever, right? And what alcohol does is it turns that off. So you're like, whatever, fuck it, man, I'm the same as everyone here. And what happens is you can get that state by changing your life philosophy, right? What is it that you believe about philosophy? What is it you believe in your life, and how can you change it? Because a lot of us have maladaptive life philosophies. I used to believe that everything was against me. I had to fight the world to get what I want. I wasn't good enough. I wasn't this. I wasn't that. And I was just having a hard time. And then I learned that I don't really need to listen to the narrator because the narrator was also programmed. The narrator was also conditioned to think what it thought and say what it said. And we have to look at it and we have to say, well, who are these thoughts? Who put these thoughts in my head? Because I didn't sit down at, 25 years old and say, well, I'm going to believe these things. No, they were just kind of put on me. It's called socialization. And when you go through life and you get socialized, right, some of us fall through the cracks. And unfortunately, in our society now, we're seeing more and more and more people fall through the cracks. Not enough jobs to go around, not enough status, not enough esteem. Now, instead of like the olden days where you're like, see that guy's house on the mountain? Yeah, he owns the car dealership and he's rich. Now we could look at every guy on every mountain and we're comparing ourselves in an unfair universe where it's like, yeah, we're going to see everyone. It's not cool and we don't even need to compete because I can be happy with what I have. And so we look at this and we get caught in this world where our life philosophy is cattywampus, as they call it in the South, right? And it's all off skew. And it's like, well, who decided this in the first place? And we have to look at that and say, well, now it's time for me to decide what my life philosophy is going to be.
Right. Not worrying about what other people think. That's another key for my sobriety is well, not so much worrying about what other people think, but just keeping my side of the street clean, taking care of what I have control over. That's important for me. And that way I don't sit there and dwell and compare myself. Well, I still do all the time, but I try to let it go. And that's an important thing. The other
Absolutely.
thing for that positive reinforcement is it's when you first get sober, especially, but a lot of times, throughout sobriety, I've had it happen even recently, just not feeling so great about things and not being so grateful about things. And that's where I have to sit there and really consciously think about what I'm grateful for, what's going good in my life, and what's not going bad. That's important too. I'm not in jail. I have a home. Things like that. It's big for reinforcing and getting those positive feelings going and helping with sobriety. Just and realizing just the fact that I woke up sober today, or just the fact that I woke up. It's big.
Absolutely. THC Gamer says, I'm still going through acceptance phase. And I think acceptance is key. And I think it's where a lot of people struggle because we have to accept where we're at right now.
Right.
Wherever you're at in your life right now, you need to accept it. It doesn't mean anything. Like, okay, I'm an alcoholic. I accept that. Now, what we do is we attach meaning to it. I'm an alcoholic. That means I'm a quitter. I'm a failure. I'll never beat this. And, I'm like that guy over there in the gutter who can't contain his alcohol. And maybe you, maybe not. But the fact of the matter is we accept it. We accept where we're at. Alcohol is not working for us. That's what we accept first and foremost. And we accept that we have been conditioned and we have been led to think that alcohol is the solution for everything. And also accept the fact that if anyone was in your shoes, thought the way you thought, and drank the way you drank, they'd be an alcoholic. I don't care who it is. Take the Pope, right? Like, give him enough alcohol, he's going to be a drunk. It's what happens. It's what alcohol does. That's why I call it an alcoholic and not like, a guy who can't contain his liquor or whatever, right? It's an alcoholic because you're addicted to alcohol. And alcohol has addictive properties and it has withdrawal symptoms and it has all kinds of things. That's what a hangover is. It's a withdrawal symptom, right? And we look at it and we're like, okay, well, how do I deal with this? How do I accept it, right? And I got to accept it where I'm at and say, who the hell cares what I am or what I'm not? The fact of the matter is alcohol's not working for me. What am I going to do about it? And I remember hearing a couple weeks ago, I was talking to someone and they were like, I don't have problems. I have situations. And we look at it and we're like, okay, what's the situation? Okay, I have an alcohol situation. What is it? Situation is I drink too much. What's the solution? Solution is don't drink. There you go. Now, if you say I got this alcohol problem, I don't know what to do about it, man. I'm going to go figure all this out. Then you're going to get all led down rabbit holes and everything like that and looking for mind hacks and all kinds of things instead of looking at the problem for what it is, which is a alcohol issue. Get alcohol off the table. Watch what happens to your life. Watch what happens to your thoughts. Watch what happens to your conditioning. Watch what starts to happen. And the first few months might not be perfect. A lot of people get sober and they're like, I'm going to get, my spouse back. I'm going to get $1 million and a Bentley's going to appear in my driveway because I got sober. Yay me, pat myself on the back. And that's not what always happens. What happens when you get sober is you get sober. That's what happens.
That's
Now you
it.
still got to deal with stuff. Got a DUI, it's not going to disappear because you don't drink. Now it might help if you go to the judge and you're like, hey, I quit drinking. I'm going to go to AA every day. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to, read books. I'm going to listen to talks, and I'm going to get myself right. Maybe it'll help a little bit. But the fact of the matter is don't look at sobriety to heal things that are going on in your life that are unrelated, right? Look at sobriety because you want a sober mindset and you want a different life. And I think that's really, really key.
Yes, it is. You're going to bring it, you stop drinking, you bring yourself back up to where normal people are. That was a reality that I had to deal with was, take alcohol off the table and I'm back to just being part of society. I'm not above them. Nobody's above me. I'm not above anybody else. I'm just right there. But I now have the tools to move forward and I'm able to move forward where alcohol was just holding me back. Everything was going to happen tomorrow. And then tomorrow would come and I'd drink more. And so all that stuff would get pushed back. Somebody mentioned earlier that alcohol and benzos were their way of calming themselves down. But what I wonder, because it was the case for me, I didn't deal with any benzos, but for alcohol, sure, calm me down right away. And I'd stayed calm, but not the next day. Then the anxiety would come back even worse. And of course, drink more and stay calm. And then the next day, the anxiety would come back and get even worse. And that was the hard part. It just snowball and get worse and worse.
Exactly. And Upside Down says, I couldn't believe I started drinking again after all the bad crap that happened before. I can believe it. And there's a reason so many people relapse. One, because it's never really off the table.
Right.
Right? That's the first thing. Like if it's off the table and you're like, I don't drink anymore. That's what I don't do. That does help. But there's also times in life where you get those certain things, and maybe you didn't build up enough tools. Because what's going to happen over time is right now you're conditioned that alcohol is a solution for all kinds of things. Right? It was a solution for everything for me. Like if it's raining out, just drink, and it doesn't matter if you sit in the rain. If it's sunny out, just drink. It doesn't matter if you're 1,000 degrees. And we look at it, and we're conditioned by alcohol for everything. And so when we get sober, we start to build tools. And we're like, okay, well, I went to a certain thing. I went to work 20 times without drinking. And you train yourself that it's okay. And now you go to work, and now it's second nature, right? Then maybe like you get in a fight with your spouse and you're not prepared for it. You're like, oh shit, this threw me for a loop. All right, the key is don't go drink. Start to build new pathways. Start to build new brain systems where you can stay sober, right? And those tools are going to be second nature. And they'll start to build, and they'll start to build. And instead of going and reinforcing it, because every time you drink, you reinforce it. And what happens is people get down on themselves. Oh, I was sober for 22 years and I went out and drank. What the hell, man? I must not be strong and I lost everything and I'm on day one again. And you see them and they're miserable and everything like that. Instead of looking at it and saying, yeah, I'm an alcoholic. That makes sense that I would drink. I conditioned myself a bazillion times that alcohol is going to work. And I just didn't have a tool for that thing that happened in my life. And what you're going to notice is that every day that you stay sober, you're going to start to build new thoughts. And you're going to start to change your mind if you actively do it. Now, if you're what they call a dry drunk, where you're like, oh, fuck, man, I can't drink anymore. This sucks. Can't drink because the judge said so. Can't drink because parents make me go to rehab, right? That's an angry drunk, which never really changed his outlook. And that's why they say a lot of times that grateful never relapses. If you're grateful, you're not going to relapse because you're like, hey, I don't need to drink because I'm grateful for what I have. And I'm grateful. Even if I want to drink right now, I'm grateful that I don't have to have it. And I realize that in my life, 15 minutes can stop the world for me. 15 minutes. If I sit there and I have a craving where I'm like, oh, motherfucker, I want to go drink, right? And it's coming on strong, I can sit there and say, this is going to pass in about 15 minutes. And it usually will. If it doesn't, give yourself another 15 minutes and another and another. And don't give yourself 15 minutes at the bar with the favorite drink in front of you. That's not going to work. Give it to you somewhere else where there's no alcohol. Go to a meeting, talk to someone else, follow along with what other people are doing and listen because it's very, very, very important. And if you're an angry drunk, Figure out a way to be happy. Figure out a way to be grateful and understand these things.
Yes. Learn how to reach out. I have a person I'm working with, and they're newly sober again. I don't know, they got about a month or so, but we had our power shut down a couple of months ago to prevent wildfires, and it was interesting, but as far as how life goes without power, very interesting how learning how to deal with that, and that was his excuse for picking up a drink after having a little bit of sobriety, and this is a person that's been fighting it for decades, and
Mm-hmm.
keeps on picking up that drink. And what did it? But I look at it. I can't analyze why they picked up the drink. I don't have an answer why. But some of the things I see, there's no real friends on the outside, no hobbies, a negative outlook on everything. He's got some serious resentment issues against some other people,
Mm-hmm.
and just not working these things out. And so the power went out, and this person was doing everything, going to outpatient, going to AA meetings, doing everything they could think of doing. Then the power went out, and oh, better sit in my garage and do nothing. And that was tried waiting, couldn't wait, but he had that bottle that he didn't have enough bottle of alcohol. He had a bottle of vanilla extract. He drank it. He's right back there, full blast. And I don't know what it was that made him start to drink again and make that decision to drink that, and then thus continuing on. Could have made a phone call, called me after he drank it, but it was too late. I went over. I tried to get him to stop and do some things to be able to stop. Didn't happen. Had to let it go. But that's the crazy thing is you got to build these neural pathways. You have to do things. You have to figure out what do you like to do? What makes you happy? What made you happy before you started, before alcohol was an issue? For me, it was cycling and hiking. And what is it? Maybe reading. It doesn't have to be an activity. It's just something that makes you happy. And figure out those things so that you can be grateful for what you just did. And always the other factor involved with this is just, I've seen people with decades of sobriety and they start drinking again. And that's what Marcus was touching on, that they have to understand all the time that they're an alcoholic. It just takes that one drink. That one drink may not make a person drink right away, start go full blown. For me, it would. I've done that before, and I was full blown in 2 days. A lot of people, they have that drink, and they're like, "Oh, I'm okay. Maybe I wasn't as bad as I thought." And then I think I'll drink again, and the next weekend or something. But then every one of those people that were full blown alcoholics, they start drinking again. They get back there, and then it's really hard to come back. I noticed, who was it? Melanie was saying after 7 years. Not sure if you meant 7 years you were out drinking, but that's kind of what I took it as. But a lot of people, it takes them that long to get back to being sober. It's hard.
Absolutely. And we just have to look at it and really get it off the table and say, I'm not going to drink anymore because I know what it does to me. And you kind of have to override what your emotions and your feelings believe. Because your emotions and your feelings were like the little rat that was in the thing pushing the little button, have been hijacked. And we have to realize that alcohol hijacks our brain. Alcohol hijacks our emotions. So we got to really, really look at that and really focus. There was a question by, who was it? Chris in Philly. He says, how do you give you guys a donation? If you do want to support the channel and get MP3s and PDFs of our talks, and other bonuses and stuff, actually after the first of the year, Terry and I are putting together a course to help you guys get and stay sober, and all kinds of life stuff and things that we've learned. You can go to talksober.com, click on the support the channel button, and you can help us out there. If you want to do something different, you can email us. But we find that is the best way to get going, and it's less than the price of a light beer a day. So, pretty cool. And you get all kinds of cool stuff. So talksober.com, click on support the channel. That'll help what we're doing here. Obviously, there is a lot of cost involved. Right now, we are almost breaking even. So, a little bit under because we got all kinds of equipment and lights and stuff to make this happen. But, our goal here is to get the message to you guys. So, that's kind of the deal. But if you do want to help out, you can go to talksober.com and click that button. Um, let's see. Can you please explain how to apply operant conditioning to addiction? Yes. First of all, you got to look at the fact that operant conditioning is working against you in addiction because you have conditioned yourself through positive stimulus that alcohol is the solution. Once in a while, you get a negative thing or a hangover that you really don't like, and that is nothing to combat what's been done. So the first thing is to accept that you've been conditioned that alcohol is the solution for everything. Excuse me. That's the first thing to look at. Second thing is to look at, is negative reinforcement working? Probably not. So then what you need to do is you need to override it with more positive reinforcement. So step one, get drinking off the table, right? Get drinking out of your life. Step two, every single day, start to train your brain. I can live without alcohol. And on day one, it's going to be like, oh my God, I can't live without alcohol. Day two, going to be a little bit better. Day 156 is going to be a little bit better. And over and over and over again, it's going to happen. James says, please help me. I had 4 years. Now I'm struggling. James, I would go to a doctor. First of all, figure out what's going on and figure that out. He also says he tried to come out as gay and it keeps ruining me. Well, I think I would look at it and say, you are who you are.
Yeah.
You are who you are. Accept who you are. Doesn't make a difference to me, right?
Nope.
Doesn't matter to anyone. There's a couple people it does matter to. Unfortunately, our political climate is like anti be who you are and pro like, hide everything. What I would do, James, is I would try to find people that agree with you and support you. We here on the channel, we support you. Hey, I want you to be sober, straight, gay, doesn't matter to me. I love everyone. And I would try to find a group of people that kind of really understands you. There's lots of people that have dealt with this stuff.
Yep.
There's lots of people who've paved the way. Go ahead, Terry.
No, there's LGBTQ AA groups, hospital groups. They're all over the place. You just need to look them up. You can Google AA and then you find it from there, or talk. Really, James, just what Marcus says. The most important thing is you need to go to a doctor and just be honest with them, and then go from there.
Absolutely. And, really look at it and be like, hey, I am who I am. If society hasn't caught up and figured out how to accept me, that's their problem. There's a lot of people who don't accept alcoholism. There's a lot of people. And it's like, okay, well, that's your bag. I know alcoholism's real because I went through it. And we got to look at this. And I think the key, first and foremost, is to realize not only are we conditioned, other people are conditioned too. Other people have gone through their socialization and they've had their ideas and they've had things forced on them for years. And we got to look at it and be like, okay, I accept their decision. I mean, I accept whatever you want to believe. If you think I'm a loser because I'm an alcoholic, that's cool. That's what you want to believe. But for me, I know what I'm doing and I know what works for me, right? And I think that's really, really key. And James says, find me a doctor that'll go pro bono. Well, there are clinics that are, I don't know if they're free or not. I know when I was broke and I was 21 years old and I was having my first child, we didn't have money. We went to the free clinic and said, this is what we need. They helped us and I never got a bill. Not once. So there you go. Now, since then, I've paid a shit ton in taxes, but hey, there we go. James, I would also look at, if you're looking at rehab, check with your insurance, but actively figure out what you are going to do, right? And figure that out. And if you have issues in a certain group, maybe go to a different group. That's the thing. Like when you're dealing with people, so a lot of people think that when you go to recovery groups or listen to people like Terry and I or go to wherever, that you're going to have all these people and they're going to be well. Okay, now you don't take a bunch of people who drank and had life issues, put them in a room, call them sober, and miraculously have a bunch of life coaches. It doesn't work that way. I don't go when I need to go to a meeting. I don't go because I want life coaches. I go because I want to be around other sober people and I want to hear what other people say. That's why I go. Now, am I going to go there and the first person I hear say, hey, you know what? Let's be best buds. Come on over to my house. Fuck no. Hell no. Right? Maybe after like years and years of getting to know people, then I can do that. But you got to protect you. And this is your thing. You got to protect it and really, really, really focus. Um, Age, I would try to be mindful with other people that have struggles. Um, you know, like, hey, we're here to listen to everyone. So really, really focus on that. Okay? And be kind to everyone. Like, we're all dealing with stuff here. No one's better than anyone else. Just got to look at it and say, hey, we're here to help each other. We all want one goal, and that's to stay sober.
Right. Ano says, I avoid seeing alcohol completely. I even threw out the newspaper because there is alcohol advertising, but the problem is my deep conditioning in my brain, euphoric recall. Absolutely. When I first got sober, I did the same thing. I just avoided alcohol at all costs. Don't go down the liquor aisle at the supermarket. Make sure it's not in the house. Don't go to parties where alcohol is, which is pretty much every party. All that stuff. But it's impossible to avoid it. And so I had to do what we're talking about. I had to change my mindset. I had to change to the fact where alcohol is not on the table. It can be there. It can be in front of me. It's okay. It's just not part of my life anymore. And it's okay that it's part of other people's life. That's fine. And they can drink it without negative consequences. I can't. So, though it's a good thing to avoid it as much as possible when especially in early sobriety, until you figure out what you can handle. And some people, I talked to guys with a lot of years in sobriety, and they still don't go down the liquor aisle on purpose. And only reason I do is because bread's on the other side of it. That's it. But stay out of the dangerous situations. It helps a lot. Let's see. Patrick says, I'm a 58-year-old gay man who nearly let alcohol abuse end my life 5 years ago. I faced death straight in the face. My attitude now is life's way too short to let anyone's opinion dictate how I live. And I agree. That's it. That's part of it is I live my own life and I try not to let other people's opinions affect me. It still does, of course. I think about what other people are thinking of me constantly. I know, but the funny thing is they're thinking about me a lot less than I think. But you know, it's difficult. We're in a society where we tend to let other people, or think about other people judging us and try and look good in their eyes. And Facebook and all those things don't help because we see everybody's good side on Facebook. Well, most everybody's.
Yeah. I don't know.
Well, they try to put out a good
Yeah.
face.
And we just got to look at it and focus on what we're going to do, because all the talk in the world, all the psychology methods in the world aren't going to do anything. It's what you do that keeps you sober. And we can understand a lot. And before I got sober, I was a nutcase for reading psychology stuff. It's still kind of like um, my go-to thing. I like to read about it, but it didn't really help me. I just had a bunch of knowledge and I was still drunk. And the problem with it is I felt better than everyone else. I was like, I'm not like this guy because he doesn't know what's going on with his brain. I know all the acronyms for what's going on. And because of that, I didn't let people help me. And I would look down on people who just did AA or just did this or did that or whatever. And I'd look down on people instead of saying, hey, maybe this guy has something that can help me. Maybe there's something he says that can help me do this. And maybe I could focus on that. And I think that's really cool. Okay.
Right on. Yvonne says almost 5 years sober, and I believe it's all about being good to yourself and others and the choices we make. Yeah, amen to that, Yvonne. I agree. Being good to yourself and others. That's what I try to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that helps me a lot.
Absolutely. And I think that's the key is just figure out what you're going to do and start to understand and accept and say, this is where I'm at. And that's okay. Trevelyan says, I love that I can get through a book now and actually retain it. Yes, that is a good one. Really, really crazy.
Or just retain what happened the night before.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. All
Or
right.
one that hurt a lot was the promises that I would make. The promises while drinking and then completely forget it. Where were you? We were going to meet. We were going to go on a bike ride. Oh, then have to come up with some lie. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, so let's take some questions. If you guys have any questions or comments about the topic today, which is operant conditioning and how it works for alcoholism, feel free to type those in the box. We'll take them for another 15 minutes or so and then be on our way. So, any questions, comments, or concerns? And again, if you do want to support the channel, go to talksober.com, click on the um, support the channel button, and you can help us out with this.
Right on. So Ano says, I get cravings at work. We have alcohol at work. In this case, I cannot do something for sobriety. I can only change my thoughts. And yeah, that's going to happen where alcohol is there. I'm a caterer, so there's alcohol where at pretty much all of my jobs, maybe not quite all of them, because some of them are business catering, but most of them. And yeah, it's not, it's not part of the picture. And the other thing is I have, a simple tool is just drink something that I like sparkling water, splash of cranberry. I went out to dinner last night. It was great. And I had a 7 Up with a splash of cranberry. It was great, and that was fine. There's
Mm-hmm.
Christmas parties all over the restaurant, people whooping it up in the bar and in the restaurant. It's fine. That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Trevelyan says, when do you feel that alcohol was not so mind consuming after you stopped? Still thinking about it daily. Um, some people, it keeps going for quite a while. It can go for a year, a couple of years. For that happens. For me, drinking alcohol was part of my thought process every day. It still is, but the cravings are not. And they went away for me pretty much right away.
Mm-hmm.
As far as deep down cravings, I had them when I first quit. Absolutely. I mean, I was drinking for so many years. How could I not? But it wasn't something that I had to fight. And if I have to fight that stuff every day right now, I don't know if I would be sober. It's a difficult thing to do. And that's the key with changing our entire mindset is that we need to get rid of that feeling. That's where being a dry drunk is usually not successful. It's figuring out a new way to live without alcohol and with sobriety as the number one priority.
Mm-hmm. Um, Age says, what do you guys do when you go on vacation? I want to keep traveling and go to beaches and have fun, but that's so tied up with drinking that I don't know how I do it without drinking. Well, Age, what I would look at is I would really focus on, is it really helping? Like, I know when I went to vacations and drank, I'd get drunk and the vacation kind of sucked, and I missed a lot of things. Sure, there were times where it was like, hey, I want to sit there at the restaurant and have a, fancy drink while I'm watching the beach or whatever. Um, but I think you need to look at the fact that you don't need alcohol to have fun. Like, you paid all that money to go have fun at a different place. You can drink alcohol back at home if you want. Like, what's special about that? And just look at it like I don't need to drink to have fun. And I think over the last 5.5 years, I've had more fun than I've ever had without drinking. Um, so, I mean, don't give alcohol credit for your good vacation. That's because you have a good vacation, not because you have alcohol.
Yeah. I mean, what do I do when I go on vacation? I go visit the sites.
Hmm.
I go walk around like if I go to Europe, I'm going to go to the museums and do all that stuff. I'm going to go out to dinner. I'm not going to have the wine with dinner, but that's it. That's the only thing that's missing on vacation. I'm going to go to the cafe in the morning and sit on the plaza and have that cup of coffee with what would they call it there when I was in Greece? Toast. That simple, toast and a coffee. Yeah, I'm going to do that. I
Hmm.
don't have to drink. And what's really funny is when I'm not drinking and I'm on a vacation somewhere, I have so much more energy to go see all these things. Man, drinking
Absolutely.
on vacation, geez, go out to lunch and have 3 or 4 drinks and then got to go back to the hotel and take a nap. You
Hmm.
lose a lot.
You do. Absolutely. Um, what about stinking thinking? Please explain.
Uh,
You want
well,
to take that one?
yeah, I think I think in AA everybody has a different opinion as to what stinking thinking is, and I can't say that any of them are wrong. I would just say that it's just not putting sobriety as number one,
Hmm.
and uh, we want to stop the stinking thinking, and that's just kind of thinking about the focusing on the negative things, um, maybe dwelling on that person that you got a resentment against, or just being, one guy I work with, he is angry at the fact that he's an alcoholic for years, and he's fine, slowly getting over, but still, that's kind of stinking thinking, just that's where acceptance comes in,
Hmm.
accept it, just move on, it's okay. I'm an alcoholic, it's all right. I can move on from that. That might be the stinking thinking. Um, Lots of things. Just
Life philosophy is a big
life.
one.
Yeah, sure.
Anno says behavioral modification and operant conditioning happens through punishment and reward. How can I apply this system? Well, what I would look at is the fact that with alcohol, punishment is never enough for the alcoholic because the definition of an alcoholic is continuing to drink despite negative consequences. So you have negative consequences in your life, you got the negative punishment, and it's not working. So, what do we need to do? We need to realize, first and foremost, that our reward pathways, our reward has been hijacked. So we got to look at that and we got to focus and say, okay, well, if I'm hijacked, then all bets are off because now I'm literally controlled by alcohol. So what am I going to do? Well, the only thing I can do is not drink today and then tomorrow and the next day. And what's going to happen is over time, when you don't drink, you are going to change the way your brain works. You're going to get your proper reward pathways back, and you're going to realize that you can get a reward without drinking. Right? I can relax without drinking. I can be funny without drinking. I can do all this stuff without drinking. And if I can do that, then I'm going to train my brain over time to make it work. So, as far as like a mind hack to do that, the first mind hack is stop drinking because drinking literally hacks your mind and it changes the way you think about stuff. And so, we got to look at that, and even one drink is going to change your mind enough to where all bets are off. Right? If I go through and I'm like, oh, hey, I built up this good way of thinking, I got it, and then I have a drink, it's going to slowly creep in or even fast creep in and say, boom, this is how it's going to work, right? So over time, you're going to start to change. And I think that's the key.
Right. We got a couple comments here about the holiday season and all that, and yeah, next Wednesday. Next Wednesday it's Christmas. Oh my, wow, that's coming fast. But we had a webinar on Thanksgiving too, and just kind of touched on what to do during the holidays, and it's important to have a mindset sobriety, have a game plan. Some people may not be doing anything on Christmas because it's just another day for them. It was like that for me for many years. It was just like, whatever, Christmas, just another day of the year. And but it's important to have that game plan. For me, I'm going to hang out with a bunch of sober alcoholics. I'm going to hang out with my family. I pretty much know what I'm going to do throughout the day. Throughout the day on Christmas Eve, I'm going to help some other alcoholics, and that's what I'm going to do. I may go on a, I'll definitely go on a, walk the dog in a beautiful place and say hi to all my dog people, and that's important. And maybe you're going to go to a family that drinks way too much. Think about things like, should I drive myself so I can just escape? Or maybe in the middle of it, when things are going crazy, I'm going to go for a walk, or just go with my cousin that's real nice and go have a cup of coffee with them or something, and figure out something to do to not be in the depths of all this drinking and partying and all that. Or maybe it's going to just be a good family time, but it's important to think about what you're going to do. Just
Absolutely. Oh, go ahead.
go ahead. No, it's all right. Go ahead.
I was going to say a couple things to look out for on Christmas too is that, there is no rule that says you have to go see your family on Christmas. Like, that's just made up by shopping malls that want you to buy shit. It's really what it is. There's actually a rumor that, Santa Claus and all that was created by Coca Cola. I don't know if it's true or not, but it seems to make sense because, hey, there's a lot of Coca Cola commercials out there. And diamonds, too, right? Like, buy a diamond, whatever. Still have yet to do that. But we got to look at that and we got to say, I don't have to succumb to anything. And that doesn't mean I need to sit at home and feel bad for myself. Okay, because a lot of people, they will be like the angry drunk or the dry drunk, and they'll sit home and be like, I'm not with people because I can't drink, blah, blah, blah. Instead, just sit there and be like, I'm going to take a day to myself and learn to live with loneliness sometimes. That is a key because a lot of people around the holidays do deal with loneliness. But just remember, it's just a time of year where people do shit, and it's no different than anything else. And if I'm lonely, I go to meetings. If I'm lonely, I can listen to things. If I want to be quiet, I don't have to feel bad about myself not going with other people because society thinks that we're supposed to. Fuck all that. Doesn't matter. What matters is what are you going to do and how you're going to deal with it and how you're going to be okay with it. And what I'm going to do, I'm not going anywhere. We're going to stay here, just us. And it's probably going to be a sad year because what happened earlier, we lost someone in our family who was like the Christmas guy. And so it's going to be difficult. But you know what? I'm going to sit here and I'm not going to drink and I'm going to reminisce about times that were good. And I'm going to think about stuff and I'm going to try to focus on other people, And when you focus on other people, you're not focused on yourself. And that's a good thing, So really, really focus on that.
Right on. Let's see. Irritability is a gray gravy. Gray
Great
ghost. Sorry
ghost.
about that. I don't have my glasses on. Irritability is a major issue for me in sobriety. Very little sets me off, but it is getting better after 92 days sober. And after 92 days sober, yeah, your emotions are still going up and down, and you probably have bouts of happiness too. Maybe not. Depends on depending on what's going on in your life. But yeah, irritability is. It was big for me when I first got sober, and I can still get irritable, absolutely, and I just have to pay attention to that. But just understand that the irritability and that it takes very little to set you off. That's pretty common in early sobriety, absolutely.
All right, cool.
Trevelyan says, "Don't drink even if your ass falls off," and absolutely.
Mm-hmm. He said that helped him get through the first few days, and that does. My ass hasn't fallen off yet, so I'm not drinking yet. And even if it does fall off, I'm not going to drink.
Right.
And I just look at things and I take them in stride and I mellow out and I say, you know what, this isn't the end of the world. We're going to be okay. And like the guy who's 92 days sober, it starts to get better. Like there's a lot of improvements that happen in the first 92 days, but chances are we like to focus on the negative. But we don't have to. We don't have to focus on the negative just because the news does, right? We can focus on what we want. And we can focus on the fact that today's a good day because I didn't drink. And maybe other shit happened, but I didn't drink. And that's good. And if you did drink, tomorrow's a new day. A day you don't have to drink. And that's really the key that makes this work. Little steps every day change the brain. Every day. Might be difficult today. It was way more difficult to stay sober my first day out of rehab than it is today.
Yes.
And there's a lot more shit going on today than there did back then. And so we look at it and we're like, wow, now I have whatever that is, 5.5 years times 365 days. Someone could do the math. Now I have a lot of days that have conditioned my mind to say, I don't need to drink. And every day is another chalk on the chalkboard saying, hey, I trained my brain. And it's not to look at it and say, I got these days, you got those days. It's to look at it to say, hey, for the last 92 days, if I'm Grey Ghost, I changed my thinking. And day 93 is going to be easier than day 4. So we got to look at that stuff and really focus on it.
That's right.
All right. Any last minute thoughts, Terry?
For the operant conditioning, what I do is, first of all, sobriety is the most important thing to me, without exception. Because if I'm not sober, I'm not going to have those other things. If I put anything else before my sobriety, I'm not going to have my life. I'm not going to have anything if I start drinking again. So for me, the operant conditioning for me is doing something for my sobriety every day. This webinar, going to meetings, meeting other recovering alcoholics, helping people that are trying to learn how to cycle and long distances, helping them. Going and hanging out and just hanging out with friends at the dog park, things like that. And those things, they help my mind and they help develop those pathways to stay sober. And they allow me to just be happy and enjoy sobriety, not focusing on the negative things. So, yeah.
Lenora has a question I think would be a good one for you. She says, does anyone have a partner that still drinks?
Yeah, my wife, she still enjoys half a glass of wine most nights. Not every night, but she could have it or not have it. It's not a big deal, and for me, it's not a big deal either. And in the first for those first 6 months or so, maybe even up to about a year, she didn't have any alcohol in the house and didn't have drinks with me or anything like that. It was more for she was just worried about it, and I just went along with it. And then, as I learned that it's okay, and I don't, the wine bottle doesn't sit on the kitchen counter, and she cleans her own glass and things like that. And, so it's not a big deal for me.
Cool. Awesome, guys. Well, stay sober. We will see you the day after Christmas on the 26th at 11 a.m. Bright and early for people that are in the bright and early areas, almost noon for those in Florida. And we'll help you guys get started. Melanie, if you want to be informed of our live shows, it's every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 8 a.m. Pacific Time. You could subscribe and make sure that you click the bell and turn on all notifications. That'll help you get all the notifications when we do go live. It'll also tell you when we schedule the lives, so that you'll see all of those and everything like that. And that's the key. Also, if you do want to support the channel, if you like what we're doing here, go to talksober.com, click on support the channel. For less than the price of a cheap ass beer a day, you could be helping us spread the word to a lot of alcoholics, because we do want to grow it. And I just did invest in a course to learn how to grow and reach more people, and it wasn't cheap, but I did it for my other business too, so that's where the funds came from that. But if you do want to help us grow and reach more people, spread the word and click the support button and help us out. Thanks again for joining. I'm Marcus. That's Terry over there, whichever way it is on the screen. We'll see you guys next week. Stay sober, even if you're, or what? Don't drink even if your ass falls off. There you go. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining, guys.
Thanks, everybody.